Today, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the beginning of this game. Let's get right into it. Hey guys, Destined here, and to start off the new AFK Journey channel, I figure a beginner's guide is very fitting, especially because it is the beginning of this channel. But I'm not alone. Joining me is my friend Misery from a different game. We've both really been enjoying this one, and it's been a blast thus far. Misery, would you like to introduce yourself?
What's up guys, Misery here. Some of you may know me from Watcher of Realms, that's where me and Destin first know each other from. We both started playing AFK Journey together recently. It's been a fun experience so far, and I'm looking forward to see where this journey takes us.
For those of you who might not know, AFK Journey, just to summarize, is an ethereal fantasy RPG by the makers of AFK Arena, which is a pretty good game in its own right, but this one's better, honestly. This game is one of my favorite mobiles. I'm not sponsored, but if the game company's watching this, you could sponsor me. But anyways, so this game has a perfect blend of breathtaking animation, a stunning art style. The story is captivating yet profound, has fleshed out, intriguing characters, and the scenery and environments of this game are honestly just beautiful, especially for a mobile game. The combat in this game also shines through a lot. It's a fun and strategically complicated experience, and the combat is a main focus, and it's honestly one of the most fun parts. So in this video, I will be splitting them into sections, like the topics that we will be going over and kind of teaching you about. And to start off, let's get into the combat. As I said, the combat in this game is surprisingly in-depth, whether it ranges from interactive puzzles, unique formations, complex strategies and synergies, and there's a lot to the combat in this game, which creates for a really interesting playing experience. Though the things that I could suggest is, starting off, you should immediately be trying to figure out how your units operate and a general framework for how you should be building your team. Both how teams generally are built, how they interact with your enemies, and also interact with each other is very important to understand. While it's not always the way to go, most teams will have either a tank or two, some DPS, and some support. Early on, it doesn't really matter too much because you could just play with like 3 DPS and it'll work. But later on, it's a good idea to plan for having a more structured team, and the earlier you plan ahead, the easier it will be when you get there. Another very important thing to note is factions and faction bonuses. So when you have at least 3 units on the same faction, you get a substantial boost to your stats. It's like 11% or so when you have 3 of the same factions, and it gets stronger progressively if you have 4 of the same faction, 5 of the same faction, or alternatively, if you do a sort of full house, if you played Yahtzee, where you have 3 types of one faction and 2 types of the other. And these boosts boost everyone on your team, not just the faction hero. So I cannot understate the effect this has in a wide variety of content, and the impact it has on your gameplay. Sometimes it's completely worth building a team purely based on the faction bonus, even if the units are not as strong as other matchups, because the boost that they get is just so impactful. Another thing that you also have to note that comes alongside the faction related things are type matchups. It's similar to Pokemon, where depending on your factions, you will actually be stronger or weaker against certain ones. So it can really be worth thinking about factions when you're adjusting your teams and thinking about who you are facing. Just some quick faction pairings I will show on the screen, and these are kind of the matchups. You want to keep this in mind at all times. It's not the most important thing ever, because raw unit strength can be more important sometimes, but it does actually make a difference. Something really cool this game has as well is interactive battles. Every once in a while, you will get a fight that brings you to a scenario where you have to use environmental objects, and you also have to use set characters to win the fight. Those are called battle drills, I'm pretty sure. And in those, you basically have to use your knowledge on placements, how to interact with the field, and also on characters to win the fight. Those are really, really fun. Probably one of my favorite parts about the game, especially with the combat. But there are certain parts of those that will trickle into normal combat, and that means that the environmental objects will actually just be in normal fights sometimes. So it's important to kind of be aware of how you can use those, because they can turn the tide of the fight very, very fast. And a lot of the time, they can damage your units too, so you gotta be careful. Another thing to note is there is a very wide variety of modes, whether it's arena, boss fights, or just story missions. They can all differ fairly wildly, but the most important one to mention is AFK levels. AFK levels are kind of like a homage to the predecessor AFK Arena, where it's a long series of stages, each more difficult than the last, and the further you push, the more resources you will gain. Basically just an endless string of levels, and every single time you beat a level, you end up getting stronger resources and more resource gain. It's very, very, very important and heavily recommended. Push that as far as you can, whenever you can, because the more resources you're accumulating, the stronger you can get faster, and then the farther you can go. And it's just a snowball effect that you always want to be aware of. So just keep that in mind. If you're ever struggling on an AFK stage, there is a feature called the replay system where you could watch other people's teams and how they beat the stage. I will have a longer video on a lot of these tips, especially the replay system, which kind of gets neglected, so expect those in the future. This game also has a wide variety of events, most of which are using the combat system. It can differ from boss fights, arena, and quite a bit more, as I mentioned earlier, and the main thing to note here is that it's recommended to be attempting to push further whenever you see an opportunity. And then another tip I have to give is you should buy your arena attempts every day. It gives you more gems when you push levels in arena, and it also gives more arena points, which lead to bountiful rewards, also known as buying heroes. I will get to that in the shop section. Also, in combat, do not underestimate the power of both supports, kit synergy, and even units that don't seem very good. There are a lot of units that initially, I kind of fell victim to this, where you will think, oh, this character is complete garbage, and you will never use them again, such as, for example, Coco, which I thought was garbage when I joined, and now I realize that Coco is one of the best A-tier units in the game. You really do not want to sleep on the A-tier units at all. Stuff like Damien, Arden, Marilee, Leica are all very, very good. Something like Odie is amazing. There are a lot of really interesting characters, which I will touch on later, or Misery will touch on later, and we will be going over that. But just do not sleep on any units. Try them out, experiment with them, and they might just surprise you. With the proper setup and strategy, most heroes that seem useless can really, really just push you past seemingly unachievable stages. Take your time to learn what works and utilize everything in your arsenal as best you can, and that is most of the advice for combat.
The heroes in this game are very diverse, varying wildly from each one. Starting off with the Graveborn, this faction is the smallest faction of the main four. With that being said, it's nothing to scoff at. Units such as Cecilia is who you get in your first tempo and will be your main carry starting off into the early game. Next we have Thorn, who is one of the best units in the game and the best tank in the game, with his ability to revive multiple times throughout a fight, making him a good pick for AFK stages to progress with. Viperion early on is viable and good as an AoE mage, but tends to fall off later on, so if you do decide to use him, don't invest too much into him, is my personal opinion. Sylvina can be decent in some situations, as she instantly goes to the enemy's back line, but she is very squishy and can die easily, so proceed with caution if investing into her. And lastly, Carolina is more geared towards the late game, but she is a great crowd controller and debuffer, viable in some comps early on, as she isn't the worst. Next we have the Wilder faction, which contains one of three supports you can start off with. Hewin. She is amazing in every part of the game and has the best raw healing in the game. The only downside is her ultimate takes a long time to charge up, so it's advised to use Rowan with her if you do, which is another one of three supports you can get as support pity alongside Smokey. Onto Aaron, he's amazing for grouping up enemies with his AoE Whirlwind ultimate that groups them together. He shines in AoE cons, but really starts picking up later when you get his exclusive equipment at Mythic Plus. Some A-tier units we have are Leica, Arden, and Damien. Leica is good as she buffs allies' attack speed and reduces the enemy's physical defense. Personally, I recommend putting Damien and Arden as Wilder's A-tier's wishlist, as they're a lot more flexible and better on later into the game. Second to last, we have Maulers. This faction is really good in keeping your team alive, as we have units like Coco, Smokey, and Entendre. Coco provides the team as the support role and gives damage reduction to the entire team. So when paired with Smokey, who buffs allies' attack and continuous heals, it's really sustainable comp, especially with Entendre, who alone has great survivability. But that's just the start. We also have Odie and Kruger, who are some of the best A tier units in the game, with Odie having amazing single target DPS and Kruger giving a 30% physical defense reduction on enemies after one ult and goes to 40% after 2 ults, making him insanely good for physical damage comps in Dream Realm. Lastly, with the Light Bearers, they're strong against Maulers and weak against Graveborn. As a faction, they have tons of amazing units such as Rowan as a support who boosts energy and occasionally heals, Valen and Corrin as damage dealers that play the warrior role, and Tamisia and Lucius are the main tanks for this affinity, and both are great when first starting off. Lucius provides shields that will help keep your composition alive. Similar to Tamisia, she draws aggro from the enemies constantly moving, helping a lot with keeping your team alive. Vala, Merrily, and Cassidy are some great alternatives. Also with Vala and Merrily being able to provide displacement, which is great for staying alive. It's not recommended to put Cassidy early on in the wish list, but if you do happen to get her, she can buff allies and reduce enemies' magic defense, which is great for Dream Realm. Speaking of wish list, it is one of the most important things to set up as an early game player. It will decide how much progression you can make on your account, so it's vital to have it correctly done. There are 2 types of wish lists, the all hero banner wish list and epic wish list. So we'll start off with the all hero banner wish list. It is something that can vary and be flexible to change for every account, but personally these are the options I would pick for both my wish lists if I were just starting off. For Graveborn, I would go Thorin, Cecilia, Sylvina, and Viperion. Next for Wilders, I would go Aaron, Hewin, Damien, and Arden. Second to last for Maulers, I would go Smokey, Brutus, but switch out with Shakir after you get 1 copy of Brutus, 1 copy of Coco, then switch with Kruger and Odie for A tiers. You could also go for Entendre. She is better than Thorin in some AFK stages, but that's not until later on. If you do go Entendre, I would take her out of the wishlist after you get her legendary. I just think Kruger and Odie are way better options for progression. And lastly, for Light Bears, I would go Tamisia, Rowan, Merrily, and Corrin. Probably wondering, what banner do I summon on? It's quite simple actually. If you're a spender, then pull on the limited rate up banner if you want. For example, right now it's Vala, but if you're free to play, stick with the all hero banner as it's better to get a more fleshed out roster with A tier units that are 22.5% chance on the all hero banner, whereas limited rate up it's only 10%. For every 100 limited rate up banner summons you could do 110 on the all hero banner. I would really only summon on limited rate up banner if you're a whale, really like the unit, or it's some ridiculous power creep unit. Something I like to add in real quick is the amount of copies you need for each tiered unit to get Supreme Plus. 64 copies for A tier, 8 copies for S tier, and 14 copies for Celestial Hypogene units. Destined will have a picture providing the resources needed for each tier of each type of unit somewhere on the screen, so don't worry if you wanted to see how much a lower tier cost. But while we're on the topic of summoning, you probably noticed you get these things called Dolly tickets. Those can be used in the Imperium to gain various awards just for summoning. I'll let Destin talk more about those and the numerous resources you need for each shop.
Now let's move on to the shops. There are quite a lot of shops in this game, and I'm just going to give a quick overview on things I would recommend buying, especially early game, and stuff along those lines. I will have some more dedicated videos, like I mentioned earlier, on these, because they do go pretty in depth. But to start off, I think that you have to think about the recruitment store. Here, I would only suggest buying the discounted summons, so the discounted epic summons, and I would save the rest of your currency for when you unlock the Stargaze feature at 400 summons. So when you summon 400 times, you unlock the Stargaze feature, and then you're able to buy those summons. They're very hard to find. They have some of the best units in the game, so you definitely want to be saving for those. Next, you have the guild store. The only thing you gotta take into account for the guild store is you want to save for Rainier. Rainier, you want to save for. He's by far the best out of the 4, and he always will be most likely, so I would highly recommend going for him. Easily the best support in the game. I would also buy the discounted epic summons when you see them, and when you unlock Stargaze summons, you want to buy those for gems, as once again, you don't receive very many. In the arena store, it varies very, very heavily between what you should be getting, what you want to get, what suits your account. It varies quite a bit, but there is a general guideline to follow. So first of all, thank you to Vatra for making this infographic. It's floating around in like the main AFK Discord and everything, so I figured I would use it. You could take it as a full reference, but personally I would change it up a bit. I think it's fine to buy Sucia first. I would actually recommend to buy Sucia first, since she will be the main carry for quite a while, and you want to get her up as soon as you can. If you don't have Rowan, I would suggest you get one copy. You need just one copy for a lot of things. He's very good at just base. And then you could buy something like Helen. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you could buy one, as she is great. She's one of the best overall healers in the game. But really, the arena shop is more off of personal preference, and I don't think it's really the end of the world if you buy someone you like. In the Dream Store, it depends on quite a few factors, but personally, I think the best thing to buy out of all the A tiers is Odie. A lot of the A tiers that are good are supports, and they don't need that many stats because they're for their effects and not really their stats. But something like Odie is one of the best DPS in the game. He's an insane damage dealer, very good against bosses, and he really needs the extra stats over something like Coco, who I mentioned was good earlier. I will, once again, have a more in-depth guide on the shops later, so stay tuned for that. Before we end off the video, there's one more thing I have to talk about, and that's obscure ways to get resources. You might think that a lot of the resources you can get in this game, such as diamonds, are just from playing the game, progressing, and then you get rewarded. And while that is true, that is the main way to get diamonds. There is actually a metric ton of ways that you wouldn't really expect to get these sorts of rewards. One example, and possibly the best example, is promo codes. So this game is very unique in the way they use promo codes, at least from games I've played, where they have like a new promo code every day, especially for like creator promo codes, and those are updated very frequently. I have a video out if you want to go check that out that just goes over all of them. But there are also a lot of websites you could look up that will give you the promo codes, and each one of these gives 100, 200 or more gems, and it adds up really fast to about like 3,000 plus gems just from promo codes. It's insane. You always want to be aware of them because every once in a while you could just get that extra boost. Next up, there's also something called the Farlight Pass, which is mobile exclusive. The way it works is you basically click on it, you sign in, and then every day when you go check it out, or at least every once in a while, if you check it out, it will actually give you rewards. So you want to be constantly checking that. They give you rewards on your birthdays. Put in your birthday. I'm not going to condone lying about your birthday, but if you do lie about your birthday, you'd get your rewards earlier. Not that I would do that, but if you were inclined to do that, I would not stop you. So that's another way you could get something done. And then the final thing is there's a lot of surveys. So especially that the game is new, they're releasing a lot of surveys very frequently, so like once a week at least as of now. And every single time you fill out the surveys, which only takes a couple minutes, you get 1,000 gems, which is ridiculous. And it really does not take that long, so always be looking for the surveys. At the second you see them, you want to be filling them out, and boom, rewards all the time. It's great. And that's everything that we have for this video. I know it's a lot of information, but I tried to squeeze in everything I could because I don't want to do a beginner guide without explaining everything you would need to know. So just take it at your own pace and do your best. If you do want to support me, this video was a ton of work. Please like and subscribe. You know, the normal YouTuber stuff. It really, really does help quite a bit. But anyways, Destined
Misery.
signing out.